Okay, guys, today I would love to give you a short talk about what are the mobile-ready micro-frontends. So I'll be talking a bit about how to combine two different architectures. On the one hand, you have micro-frontends architecture, and then on the other hand, you have hybrid apps application. That's the situation that we've been in front of a couple of months ago, and I would love to give you a short, brief talk on how we achieved that. I will add that we haven't had that luxury to start from totally scratch. We haven't had luxury of creating new apps, web or mobile apps, because most likely we would pick different technologies. So you could ask, why? Why you decided to do it, right? Well, there are certain, I would say, arguments why we decided to do it. When looking at the micro-frontends, you may say they provide or they promise you flexibility, they promise efficiency, they promise scalability of the teams, of your development, and of feature delivery. On the other hand, when you look at the hybrid apps, they promise you to write once and run everywhere. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it like it solves all of the problems, right? So now I can just write code once and deliver everywhere, for iOS, for web, for Android. Great. So why is it so hard? Why is it not so straightforward? My name is Sebastian Gos, and I'm development manager at BEC Poland. And apart from that, I'm also coding that. I have two small kids. They're watching me as well, so I hope that they like it. But I'll also mention later on how they look like when I start talking to them about micro-frontends. Apart from that, I'm also helping companies in trainings, in workshops, in lectures, and also providing some advisory. So if you need any sort of help regarding the topics mentioned on the slide, then reach me out, come to our stand at BEC Poland stand outside, and let's have further discussion. All right, let's start from a couple of questions. I can barely see you, but I'll try to go on a side and try to see the raised hands. So please help me. Give me some energy from you. So first question, how many of you have participated in the previous editions of NG or JS Poland? Please raise your hand, guys. All right. And next question, how many of you have heard of micro-frontends? Wow, guys, where are you? Where have you been when we've been recruiting people? All right, next question. How many of you have successfully implemented micro-frontends in your companies? All righty. Next question. How many of you have heard of hybrid apps? Okay. And I promise you the last question. How many of you have combined these two things successfully in the companies? All right. Then I guess I'm mad, right? Standing here and talking about that. All righty. Let's talk about some numbers, because they can also give you some justification why we have decided to do it. So when you look at the top 50 retail apps in US at the moment, 74% of them are currently hybrid. And the trend is going that there will be more. Does it mean that the native is finished? No. But does it mean that the hybrid approach has some great promises? Well, maybe yes. Let's nail it down. What's more, there are some great statements. Maybe we are not doing sexy things on the daily basis, right? Maybe we just deliver regular stuff like CRUDs everywhere, right? But they deliver the business value for our customers. And as you can see also in this statement, of course, if you're coming from gaming companies, well, that's not true. But majority of our deliveries, of you guys sitting over here, let's be honest, we do tons of quotes every day. What's more, the power of a community of web developers is 30 times bigger than the native developers. So it means that also from perspective of hiring people, it should be fairly easy to find web developers who are willing to work on web technologies. So having that in mind, you could say, okay, so he has some numbers that proves that maybe it's really worth to invest into hybrid apps and maybe also to combine it with the latest trends. And I would say, no, not at all. Some of our findings are that it is very challenging. It is very challenging to work on some combined architectures, to find out to work on an architecture that gives a great promises to our customers, but underneath it's super complex. On the one hand, you could say that SPA with state management is already a great challenge for some of the companies. And here we are adding micro frontends. Well, you could see the numbers on the audience. You heard about them. But how many of you have successfully implemented it? Well, not many. And then we're also adding upon this last layer of complexity, which is cross-platform approach, right? Does it sound as a challenge to you? All righty. One thing I would love you to remember from this presentation is this definition, the curse of knowledge. That's usually the face of my kids when I'm driving to kindergarten at the early morning and talking about micro frontends with my friends over MS Teams. What the dad is talking about. That's usually also the face of some of the developers when we start talking to them about this. When we start nailing down what micro frontends are, and also what cross-platform approach and combination of those two is. That's a super complex thing. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, it gives a great promise to our end customers. So let me tell you a short story how we did that. In June 2020, I did a first presentation of what micro frontends are to my company. I nailed down what is a difference between monolith, SPA, and micro frontends. People have been listening, but as you can expect, banking sector, well, things are not changing very often, right? So I thought it will be just influential talk for them to understand that there are micro frontends, and that's it. But apparently, almost a year later, in September 2021, I heard from my product manager that, Seb, we have a budget, we will be doing it. And I was like, am I dreaming in banking? No matter, no way, it's impossible, right? He came to me and he presented me what they have sell. So I quickly figure out that we have architectural challenge. Because we presented micro frontends and they have sold micro frontends for mobile apps. That's probably one of the challenges we figure out immediately. But yeah, customers wanted it, so let's try it out. The second biggest challenge we faced was like how we will find people who are combining those two approaches and have experience with that, who has knowledge about it, who can also teach the others, and who can develop this solution. And I would say October 2022, and I'm super glad to say that we delivered. We have launched the first mobile-ready micro frontend 2 weeks ago. And exactly, guys, a big round of applause for my team, because I wouldn't stand over here and talking to you if not them. And they're watching it right now, so may I ask once again for a big round of applause for them. You're great, guys. Thanks. Alrighty. But now you should ask question, okay, great talk. Can we go into technical details, how you do it, right? So there are certain different ways how you can achieve that using different tools, different techniques, different frameworks. And I will not be able to go into super details in the next 8 minutes, but I'll try to give you a short snippet of what we did, short teaser. So the first thing I had in mind when we sit down with my team was we do not have time or budget to figure out things ourselves. We do not have time to write our own frameworks, to write our own engines, to write our own hybrid apps framework. So the first thought was, let's use what's on the market. And fortunately, there have already been some of the solutions. There have been things that Manfred been talking about around module federation and support in the Nix for generating micro frontends. In company, we are currently using Angular, so that was also a bit easier for us to, let's say, to pick this technology because we didn't have to rewrite the whole code base. But there was also one additional killer technology or killer feature. Ionic has delivered a tool called Ionic Portals in September 2021. And that was a game changer for us. That was a game changer for us because that allows you to expose web content in existing native apps. Mentioning we didn't have this luxury of developing applications from the scratch. That was the killer feature that enabled us to deliver and enabled me to present that today for you guys. So, short elaboration on what do you need? Well, first of all, you need to have Ionic, right? You need to have portals, so you have to install them. Apart from that, you also need to set up your build scripts to reflect Ionic. Apart from that, you also have to register your enterprise Ionic key, because that will allow you to generate future portals in your native application. The next steps are around setting up the capacitor to use module federation. So Ionic portals underneath, they are able to use capacitor, which is again Ionic product, and module federation. So a Webpack 5 feature that gives us tons of functionality for micro frontends. So what you potentially could do, well, at the beginning, you need to set up the remotes. And maybe you remember a book that Manfred wrote and been presenting it yesterday. You might see there are some remote entry JS files. So that's mainly a definition of your micro frontends in this specific case. There is a definition for your local development and as well for your end production build. There is also needed capacitor configuration that will give kind of understanding on which path in your mobile application a given micro frontend should be loaded. It requires you to build those micro frontends early, deploy them separately, but then you can use them within your native application. Then the last part about setting up the portals, or setting up a single portal, giving a kind of Android example. First thing you have to do, you have to have a portal manager who is managing the portals. So you have to register that, and once you register that with your API key that you generated at the very beginning, then you are able to use it. And it's so easy. So why I talk it's complex? Why I talk that this is super complex and require a lot of effort to deliver? Because again, in this approach, we're mixing those architectures. And I have to tell you that When you look and browse the internet, there's not a lot of such examples. So that's why it's also even more complex, because most likely we've been doing it as one of the first companies in Europe. So, last but not least, things to remember when working with micro frontends. So I'm jumping from hybrid apps to micro frontends, because I believe that these days we are not talking about all of the aspects of micro frontends. Manfred is showing a great examples of how to start your journey with micro frontends. But I haven't seen a lot of presentation when people are talking, this is our lesson learned from micro frontends. This is where we failed, this is what we succeed with, this is what you have to focus on. So I would say the first most important thing is, if you're an engineer or architect thinking about incorporating or introducing micro frontend architecture, is think about the goal, about the business goal, an architectural goal that you have to achieve. Maybe micro frontends are not for you guys. Maybe hybrid apps are not for you. Think about this business goal that is set at the very beginning. In our case, the goal was to deliver one common digital bank for our customers. And having this one common digital bank means a lot for us when we decide to pick these and combine those two architectures. Where companies are failing implementing micro frontends? On organizational structure. Why? Because when you work with multiple features, which are, let's say, split into certain domains, you might miss who is responsible for what. So in a moment, you become a blind when it comes to responsibility. And I guess you understand what does it mean, right? When someone is calling and saying, hey, you have a problem with your micro frontend. Well, it's not my problem. That's another team, right? So when implementing micro frontends, make sure that your organizational structure, that your company structure, that your team structures represents also how you split your application into micro frontends. Technology and frameworks. I think you are good at it. Majority of us sitting in this room would be able to pick let's say, the frameworks or tools that they would use for development. Design system. When developing micro frontends, you have to assure that the end-to-end user experience is coherent. So having one team developing using Bootstrap and another material design might end up in an unwanted behavior. Remember about DevOps. Remember about that micro frontends enables you to do things faster. But it also requires tools. It requires organization to understand there are different ways of development. Logging and monitoring, making sure that you understand when your micro frontends are up and running, when their performance is poor. Are you monitoring proactively on the daily basis with your micro frontends? Ask yourself this question. Introducing micro frontends breaks some of the rules around security in existing applications, and that's also very important metric or very important matter that you have to take into account. Security officers, usually they lose hairs becoming bold guys when they start working with hybrid apps and micro frontends. Testing. Someone could argue, but you know, DevOps is also, testing is part of the DevOps, right? Yes, it is. But I'm highlighting it over here because also from testing perspective, tons of stuff are changing. There might be one team responsible for micro frontend 1, micro frontend 2, and a core team responsible for a shell. Try to imagine, we are testing our micro frontends and shell, but is there anyone testing integrations or end-to-end? What's happening in the application if you jump from one micro frontend to another? Think about it as well. And one of the most underestimated factors governance. So understanding who is responsible for what. Scope of responsibility is a keyword over here. Save your ass on the documentation level before you release something to production. If you're curious about hearing more about how we did that in details, in technical details, also about our struggles, how we figure out all of those things I mentioned a moment ago, we will be recording a podcast together with Darek after the conference. So you should, if you're interested, of course, subscribe to this podcast, and you will get a bit more details in the future. Thanks a lot, guys. If you're interested in working in something like that, then join me on the stand. And again, thanks for ability to be here. It was a pleasure.